Well, good morning if you are in San Francisco, California, or New York City, or Philadelphia, or Massachusetts, or good late afternoon in Scotland, an
Yeah.
hour later still in Germany. Greetings to people all around the world. Welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. As you know, Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. Today is February 7th, 2025. This is my 251st program on this series. It's been nonstop in a wonderful way since April 24th of 2020. And I'm happy to continue. I'm very happy to welcome the guest I have today, Andrea Baker, whose work I've admired, mezzo soprano Andrea Baker. A lot I've not gotten to see her live as much as I would like, because though she's an American, she has lived in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, and in Europe for many, many years. I've seen her somewhat in Europe. I've heard her a lot in broadcasting and streaming and things like that. She's a great artist. Not everybody who's a great singer has a great voice is also a great artist. Andrea Baker is a great artist. And that's why I was very eager to have her join me today. And you join me from the United States, which is a bit unusual. You're in Massachusetts.
Yes, I have come home. Thank you so much, Fred, for your programs and for highlighting artists that don't usually get what's the word I'm looking for? Um Connection outside of usual formats to people who are interested in classical music and in how classical music is being transformed, hopefully, at the moment. Um, I am in Scotland getting ready to travel back to Massachusetts.
Right now,
And
you're in Massachusetts, actually.
yeah, I'm
You have jet lag.
here. I'm ready. Um, we are doing a week of residency in Massachusetts where I grew up. And the reason that I'm there is because my first mentor and the person I sang my first opera with, Maggie Bossy, has invited me to do a benefit concert for the Rose Conservatory. And the Rose Conservatory is a new organization that's helping underprivileged kids through classical music. And they are just outside Boston. And I felt it was really important as a kid who grew up in a place where I sang opera in high school to give back to an organization that was giving kids who maybe didn't have access to opera as young people or classical music, players, orchestra members, singers, that was really important. And once you've been in the game 30 years, it's time to start giving back. And I thought it was really important for me to come back home to Massachusetts and put some energy back. And I'm bringing Howard Moody, who's a well renowned European composer, player, uh, and also my uncle, Newman Taylor Baker, with me, who is a world renowned percussionist, to give them that vision that I had when I was a kid in Sudbury, where I looked up and I thought, oh my gosh, that's an opera singer right there in front of me. And so I'm excited. I'm really excited.
I was not going to get into it right away, but since you began in that direction, let's keep up with it. Um, this month, February, in the
Mm.
United States, is often called Black History Month. And I'm wondering your feelings about having a month for Black history, or whether, it gets compartmentalized and we bring out all the favorites in the short month of February. If we have leap year, we get 29 days. Otherwise, it's the shortest month of the year. Um, but then Black art, culture, history, and so on is perhaps recycled back into the mainstream and then brought out again. And, our public television will have lots of wonderful documentaries. Um, but then that's kind of it. And I'll tell you my opinion after, but I'm wondering whether you think that it's confining in a way to actually have it just in a month and then it's done.
Well, I'm lucky in the sense that I am, as I said before, Scottish American, so I get 2 months because in the UK we have October,
Right.
and in the US we have February, and in Germany we have February. So, um, I hate the fact that it's just 1 month. I hate the fact that we still need it. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that we get 30 days, as you said, and that's it. Um, but what's happened in the last sort of few years is that we're exploring different composers, different, in particular, for me, Black female and Black queer female composers that I highlight in my work. Um, Ayanna Witter Johnson is a Black female composer from the UK of Jamaican descent who is doing extraordinary work. Um, and somebody who I have highlighted in my show, um, also composers that are equally as good as everybody else, but you just don't stop at B. You need to go down the list a little further, and um, and also we're programmable throughout the year and not just one piece. It doesn't have to be, oh, it's February. Let's, do Black programming. No, in March, there are Black Irish composers, there's Black German composers, there's Black composers who are from all, I mean, I just, I wonder why it is that we don't talk about German composers as opposed to Austrian composers and say, oh, we only need 1 month. You know, this is Strauss month. So we're going to hear Strauss all this month because it's Strauss month. No, it's just good month. It's just good music month. That's how we program. And I think we need to move forward. I think we need people like yourselves who are contacting artists like myself who do unusual programming. Um, Last night I was at a Munich Philharmonic concert that had glass on the program that people had never heard before. And the
Philip,
feeling in the room, because we were in Germany, that's not standard modern repertoire. It was an American conductor, but what was really interesting was how it moved people because it was something they'd never heard before. Not because it was Philip Glass month or American month, just because it was a good piece. So program. That's what I'd like to see with opera, new work. Um, I would love to see the classical room be more open, like at the turn of the century, 19th, so, turn of the 20th century when it was like, oh, Hindemith. Okay, put the opera on. It's still controversial, it's still uncomfortable, but it's still relevant. And that's what my art form should be doing. But unfortunately, I think a lot of the people doing the programming are more about bums on seats than we are about an exchange of ideas and an exchange of sounds and an exchange of unusual new ways to express vocal, orchestral music. And that's something I wish there was more. I mean, if we look to a younger, more, I mean, the kids are into it. The kids totally get it. But I wish our older patrons would have a little bit more understanding for those new ideas.
well, this presents an enormously huge question for which we don't have neither the time nor the space for an answer, for one answer, but we can pick at sides of it. Um, I have very mixed feelings about when programming happens, the degree to which either the artist or someone like me, the educator, the presenter, has to give context and language, or whether you just as the artist present the work without program notes, too many notes, maybe the text if there's the text, and have the work received as it is. But to do that, let's say it's an opera or staged or choreographed production, we have to have a director, a producer on board who is willing to not make his or her interpretation of the material, what it's about, but actually try to understand what the creator of the material is. You as an artist create a lot of your own material in your programming, but let's say you were going to be in a contemporary opera where you were cast in one of the roles, but the composer and the librettist are alive. The conductor is there, of course, we hope alive. The stage director will have his or her opinion on the piece that maybe doesn't correspond to what the librettist and the composer and the conductor think. Never mind what the singer thinks. Um, I I have great trouble with that because I've seen so many people, let's stick to opera now, be turned off by opera because what they see on the stage doesn't make any sense to them. You live in Munich, which is a fantastic city for opera and music in general. But some of the productions I've seen in Munich of operas really don't correspond to what, let's say, Wagner intended. I saw Tristan and Isolde there years ago that basically just had a yellow sofa, and that was the entire scenery. And it was a ship in Act One, and it was what separated them in Act Two. It's where he died in Act Three. It was a yellow sofa was the entire production of Tristan and Isolde, and I know it was Walter Meyer. I believe it was Siegfried Jerusalem. I think it was Zubin Mehta conducting. It was an amazing musical performance with a yellow sofa. And frankly, an audience member who wouldn't know would need more help than a yellow sofa. I remember the very
Yeah.
first production I ever saw of Parsifal when I was 19, 20, maybe 21, was in Berlin. And it was in West Berlin at a time when the city was divided. And it was a green light bulb was the entire production. And whoever sang, whether it was Kundry, Parsifal, and Fortis, stood under the green light bulb and sang, and then stepped out from the green light bulb. And then the chalice of the grail came in the middle, and you heard the chorus. And that was it. It was a green light bulb for 6 hours. That does not help the audience member understand what Wagner intended with Parsifal. And so it's a long way of saying that I believe that the artistic team that gathers, including the singers, frankly, to make the production have agreement about what the story and the music mean, and how can we best get an audience member who may not have seen 30 Parsifals or Tristans know what's going on. Because if you're just reading the translated titles, then you're watching a foreign film with titles. You're not listening to the music where the story is really being told.
Well, it's really interesting. I'm gonna come back at you from the other end. The piece that I'm working on currently is called Sancta. It's a Hindemith opera, and I am working with a performance artist who was doing her first opera. Feminist inclusive theater. The opera itself, Sancta Susanna, is 26 minutes. That's the front bit of 2 hours and 40 minutes of theater. But the way that the theater piece comes together, modern, provocative, intellectually well, dramaturgically put together. I spend a lot of time at the front of the stage so I can actually, in a European theater, see people's faces. So the piece premiered 100 years ago. It was a scandal. Hindemith, Sancta Susanna, scandal. Frankfurt, it was it was booed, it was hated, it was the church said, how can you do that?" Well, what I saw is exactly what you're talking about. Modern programming, younger audience. At the start of the opera, people would sort of give that look like, "Oh, hmm, ooh, what's this about?" And I suggest to all of your watchers that they go and research Sancta Susanna. It's Götterdämmerung in 26 minutes. Bam. Feminist perspective, sexuality, church, it's got all of it. It's got all of it. But what happens is that Florentina Holzinger takes it to a totally other level. So in the front, you have people who are performance artist fans who come. They're young, they're active in the arts organizations and where they live and what they go see, but they rarely go to opera. So you have a very different audience, but you also, when you perform at Stuttgart Staatsoper, you have traditional opera people. So at the start of the evening, you have people giving you that look like, hmm, middle of the evening, oh, end of the evening with techno, modern music, opera, um, Shostakovich, Brahms, Bach, hint of it that people at the end of the night are teary and waving, "Oh my gosh, that was the greatest night I've ever had." Now, I've been in the game 30 years. This is the first time I've ever left an opera gig and had our audience be moved, excited, pushed, pulled, and brought with us. And that's what we need. That's that is what we need in the game to bring young people in, to get people you are talking about performances that you saw, and I'm gonna date us, more than 20 years ago.
More
So
than
I
40 years ago.
yeah, you see, exactly. So I remember those when I was a kid, when I went to the opera and it was oh, it was just oh my forget film, forget this is the greatest art form ever. And we need to make people feel comfortable to come. We need to make people, I mean, Angel Blue is one of those people who is transforming what people expect when they walk in the room. I think the Met has finally woken up to the fact that Black people, Hispanic people, queer people, we go to the opera happily. That's the kind of energy that we need to have in our art form. It is Verdi's great. Otello, fabulous, wonderful. Boop, zoop, wha- But we need to also understand that the people we need to entice into our art form are the same people who go to the theater and it's 3 hours long, or who go to a movie and it's 3 hours long. But we need to offer them something unusual, new, exciting, where you walk out the door and you're, whoa, I've never heard or seen anything like that before. And I think some of the young singers that are coming up are really doing that. I mean, they're really doing that. I would like to see huh, it's very rare that I've been asked what I think.
That's why I'm
And
here.
yeah, but it's very rare in an opera rehearsal that a director says, "How do you feel that? What do you feel about that text? What does that mean to your partner on stage?" Very rare. And I think with the engagement of women directors, female conductors, that we're starting to get a little closer to that, but it needs to be more collaborative. And collaborative is not something until the last few years that I've experienced in opera. And that's unfortunate.
Um, you anticipated something I was going to talk about, namely Angel Blue, but I'll
Mm,
get to her in a moment. She and I are friends. Um, but what I want to say before is that I'm going to push back just a little bit about what you said because I believe I'll just name two composers, Mozart and Verdi, that they are as real, as relevant, as contemporary, as immediate as anything anyone is producing today. But we who put opera on the stage have to understand their aesthetic. So, if, for example, um, Monostatos, who's a terrible guy in Disable Flute to the Magic Flute, um, there's a bad line that's said about him about his character being as black as his skin. I'm not ready to keep that in an opera production that's contemporary. But if someone does speak German, or maybe we would want to, we could talk about that. But someone who speaks German would immediately understand that line.
Mm,
So it's just the same as Otello. I would not put a singer in shoe polish blackface,
mm.
but Otello is from North Africa, Othello, and is a Moor, and therefore might be your color or my color, but he has some color. I saw a production of Othello not too long ago in which the singer was from the Baltics, and he was incredibly white with blue eyes, and he got lost in the crowd on the stage because you didn't know who Othello was. Um, Similarly, in operas where it's set in Africa, like Aida, um, if a singer is fair skinned, you add a little color, you don't make it shoe polish. But I think we're losing track of the perspective that's required to make something dramatically viable without giving offense. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a world majority ethnic woman,
Yep.
I've seen lots of opera in Asia where nobody's white. I've
Right.
seen an Aida where everybody's Korean. Well sung, well acted. I don't care what color you are. That is, for me personally, a white Western Schublade, square that everybody wants to put it in. Aida is about two princesses. Who is it that decides which one is darker and which one is lighter? And why is it that if I'm Amneris, I'm not allowed to be as brown as I am? I have to be, as I was in my first 5 productions, whited up because Western European people think that the princess has to be light-skinned and the slave has to be dark. That is a completely ridiculous way to look at how we live. So, if I can go to a theater in London and see Shakespeare where women play kings, why is that award winning? And all of a sudden, when we talk about opera, we're not allowed to shift. That's my only question. My only question is how do we move forward in an art form that's 250 years old and make it modern and speak to modern people? If there's a countertenor out there, if Brian Asawa was still alive, I would love to hear him do some of those other works, right? But uh, I don't understand how come there's such I mean Otello, if you need a brown Otello, hire one. If that is what you need as a director or as somebody who's running a theater, there's a whole lot of black tenors out there looking for work. Go find one. If you don't care what color he looks like, don't black one up. Just hire a black tenor. And that's, I think, for me, what is really important. If you need Butterfly to be Japanese, don't just hire every Korean. Go find a Japanese soprano who can sing the piece.
Yep.
Do you know? And I know that sounds, hmm, I, I don't, I don't know. I find the racism sort of uh, double-sided in the sense that on one hand, you've got to have it look this way. Just go get one. If that is your only requirement, go find a Japanese soprano. If that's your only requirement, find a black tenor. And I think I I think there would be, I mean, nowadays with so many great South African singers and great Black American singers, it's less difficult. But I think the Rolodex is so limited that what you have is people at the top who don't know any any singers who are different. I mean, non-binary. I'm a queer singer. If you need to have a carabiner that's a mezzo but looks like a man, then fucking hire one. I don't understand why that's so complicated. We're out there. We're working. you- uh, but the problem is that in the Rolodex, most of the people making the decisions don't have that expanse. And that is what makes me really upset because
Andrea,
there's
I'm
a
going to be a
whole
bit ageist. I'm going to be a bit ageist here. You and I know what a Rolodex is.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, indeed. Sorry. What do we call it now? Like a
Your
digital
your
something.
your calendar, your not calendar, your contact directory,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Whatever that is.
But
But I
for
just
younger
I
folks, it used to be that we'd have these cards that had indentations, and we'd write their name and who they were, and alphabetize it and have it sit on your desk. That's a
yeah.
Rolodex.
Yeah, and also that you stepped I mean, you were always somebody that stepped outside of your office. You were always accessible. You were always accessible in the sense of, "Oh, who's that?" And nowadays, it's agents, it's bish, 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 and I just there are so many young people out there who are looking for a career and have great skills, but don't fit the box, and I think that's really sad.
Well, I'm going to push back again just a little bit because I fundamentally agree with you. But I feel that in all music, in opera, but certainly a role like Otello that's so hard to sing and cast, you hire the best singer, no matter what he looks like. If it happens to be Russell Thomas, who's a Black American wonderful tenor, who's a glorious Otello, and Russell's available and interested, you hire Russell Thomas for all kinds of reasons, his skin color just being one. But the fact that he sings the role magnificently is to me the main reason.
Yep.
Um, but frankly, Johann Botha, the late South
Mhm.
African white tenor, was a great Otello.
He
Um,
was.
and therefore, I would have hired him too. There are so few people in the world who can sing the role of Otello that you hire the best person and then that's it.
Right,
Um,
but if you hire the best person, then you don't necessarily hire the best person and make them Black. You hire the best person
make
to sing
them
the role and interpret.
and I mean, I agree with you. Don't make them black. Don't do Laurence Olivier. Don't do early John Vickers and Placido Domingo, who in his career evolved his makeup as Otello so that he gradually found a normal color and not shoe polish. But early on, done by Franco Zeffirelli, he, but also John Vickers and other great Otellos of the past, Mario del Monaco, were really like onyx. They were
Yeah,
not a normal color from life of any
okay.
hue.
But Fred, you know Black people,
Yeah.
right? Black people come in all shades.
Yeah.
You could be Black.
I
You could
believe
but
me.
you very well be Black walking around the street. I could look at you and go, "Hey, brother." So the frame of the visual is not the problem of the opera. It's the problem of the director and the house. That's all I'm saying. I would have absolutely no problem of you walking out and singing Otello because I know I
Until
have
you
relatives
hear
in
me.
yeah, well, because I know I have people in my family who look just like you.
Yeah, I know.
So there's like I just wish we could have some kind of visual shift in our work, which is what I'm sort of experiencing with Florentina. Is that it's at the front bit, people are like, "Woo!" "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this is uncomfortable." And in the back end, if the project is right, the 3,000 people in the room are with you in the end, and they get the message. And it's not about the fact that there's 25 naked women on stage. That's not what it's about. What it's
Mhm.
about is the message. And so I firmly believe that with Othello or Aida, I don't care if I see an Aida where everybody's white. Doesn't bother me if it's well sung and well staged. Um, and
Mm.
so I just I I don't know. I I want the upper world to be a bit more open. Just more open.
Hear you. I'm going to get to that in a second because it's very important. But given that you handed me the parenthesis, I'm going to open it
Okay.
because I'm going to tell you of an experience that you referred to that has been common to my life. I'm 68, for people who don't know, has been common to my life since I'm about 5. Namely, many people think I'm black or Egyptian or Hispanic, everything but Swedish, basically. And has always been interesting to me is the way they interact with me based on their decision about what I am. So when I went to college in the Midwest in a very white state, I was darker than just about anyone. And it happened that my roommate, we were assigned roommates, was the only black in the dorm, and he was in the basketball team. And they assumed that the two black guys were put together because we were the two black guys. And he, Jimmy, assumed that I was black because I was put with him.
Mm.
And I tried to explain to him that as far as I know, I'm not. But if I were, it's great. I grew up in New York City in Harlem, where I learned to dance with the most fantastic black girls possible. And so my music, my training, my walk, my dancing was informed by Harlem. I knew Pearl Bailey when I was a kid, and we would go swimming together in the same pool. And she used to joke that we were integrating the pool because she and I were swimming together. And to me, it's just the most wonderful thing. I have a very dear friend, a black tenor from Houston, who's my age group, and he knows that I'm quote white, whatever that is, but he also was always surprised when he and I would be out working in a theater, walking the street, eating in a restaurant, and people would come up to us and either assume that I was black because my friend is black, or think he's white with a black guy and that's okay too. But whatever the decision was how the interaction began. It had nothing to do with anything that I said or did. The negative side of all this is that when a man named Rudolph Giuliani was mayor of New York City, we had something called stop and frisk, in which police officers
Mm.
would stop people who were considered suspicious. And most of the people who were stopped were men, and they were black or Latino. And often I was stopped. So I realized I was stopped because they made the decision that I was a person of color. Um, and I would ask them about that. And then they'd say to me, well, Plotkin, what kind of name is that? Well, it's Russian. And well, how do you get a Russian name? Are you Black Russian? I said, no, that's a cocktail. But whatever I am, why does it matter? And that was always the question. Why does it matter? And then people would rear back. And even if they meant the most positive things, because I feel incredibly fortunate that I grew up in a time and a place in New York City where not perfect, but all of us kids were all of us kids. And we did things together no matter what our colors or backgrounds or religions. And it really formed me. And New York is not perfect, but the thing that I most love about being a New Yorker is that we have that and that
Mm.
we interact often as people first and relate to one another and support one another. And there's I call it a gritty solidarity that we have in New York City. It's not always easy, but we're there for one another in ways that you don't always see in every other city. So I'm closing that
Mm.
parenthesis because I promised I would talk about Angel Blue. Um, Angel is doing a wonderful job here in all kinds of things at the Met, and not only. and is in the new production of Aida and
Mhm.
is singing beautifully. I went to see that on January 7th, and I was walking to the Opera House at Lincoln Center. And in New York, we have these illuminated billboards with information, history of the city, where your next bus is coming from, where to find a homeless shelter, where to get a meal, all of that information, and it rotates. And January 7th of 2025 was the 70th anniversary of Marian Anderson making
Mhm.
her Metropolitan Opera debut very late in life as
Mhm.
Ulrica in Verdi's Un ballo in Mosca. And I thought how wonderful that New York City is flashing that 2 blocks from
Mhm.
the Metropolitan Opera House. I got to the Met, Angel Blue, um, singing in a wonderful cast, Quinn Kelsey, a man of color, Morris Robinson, a man of color, who will be joining us later this month. Um, Therefore, wonderful, integrated cast. Was there any mention in the Metropolitan Opera program of the 70th anniversary
Mm,
of
probably not.
something that frankly, Rudolph Bing, bless him, he was not perfect either, but understood that we had to get over this threshold. And even if Marian Anderson was well past her prime as an opera singer, still you have her make a debut at the Metropolitan Opera, opening the door to Leontine Price, Barry Grist, Martina Royal, Grace Bumbry, Shirley Verrett, George Shirley, all the people who came after it are now coming, thankfully, in greater amount, Black people, I mean. And but it just struck me, and I love the Met. I worked there. I love the Met, but we have to do those things correctly and show leadership in that way too, not just for the present, as you said, but also for the past. If the Met did that 70 years ago, and New York City manages to get it together with everything going on here, to put that up
Mm.
on a sign so that everybody can see it. I photographed it. I can send you the picture. Um, the Met should have done something, and I guess
Yeah,
it's not institutional memory anymore that way there.
no, I mean, and I mean, with my show Sing Sister Sing, I've for the last sort of 10 years been doing deep dives into opera and Black women. I have sung for the largest portion of my career in Germany. I had no idea who Vera Little was. Vera Little first, 1951, packed her bags and moved from Alabama to Berlin. The first Black Kammersänger in Germany.
Huh.
Why didn't I know who she was? Angel Blue should be talked about somebody like that. Her first performance in Germany, I sang with her. We did a Porgy and Bess at the Berlin Phil with Simon, and we all it was a really interesting wide range of singers. It was African American diaspora from throughout the planet, but with a South African chorus and Simon Rattle conducting. So it was kind of like and the Berlin Phil playing. So it was a big mishmash, but it was her first European performance. And I remember thinking to myself, this girl's going someplace. This girl is not making her debut here. She will be not just a great soprano, but upon their shoulders. And she has done that. What she did in Verona, more power to her. And she
Describe that.
stood
I
her
know what she did,
ground.
but please describe
She
that.
stood her ground, knowing that it could have ruined her career. But I, that kind of singer, not just a Black singer, that kind of singer is more kind of a singer that we need. We need to have people who say no. People who say, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. No.
And what was
How
the
can we
issue?
come together? Say that again, sorry?
Andrea, please describe the issue. I'm not sure everybody listening know what Angel Blue said no to in Verona.
Well, she, decided that she wasn't gonna sing during, the summer season a few years ago because Ms. Netrebko was still being blacked up, as Aida, and she felt that as a Black woman, that that was not something that, as a company member during that summer, she was willing to support. What's interesting is she's gone back, she's sung there, and one of the other things is that she was asked every year thereafter to come back. She took some time off, but she is now one of our greatest American sopranos. She is
Yep.
following in the long lines of singers, Martina Arroyo, Leontine Price, Jesse Norman. She is somebody who is out there. Barry Grist, Very Little, Sister Joyner Jones. I mean, the years are long, but she is somebody who not only produces the goods, she walks the walk.
Yes, she does.
And I think that that is something that if I were her age when that had happened to me, I might not have. As I said, I was whited up for my first 5 Aidas in Germany. Um, because of course, Amneris can't be black. So I, I, I don't want this discussion to be all about racism, but I want opera to go back to where it was. It was all sung by men. Who's non-binary men who sang opera for the first 250 years of his experience. Why all of a sudden is that a problem? There's, there's amazing black opera singers from America, South Africa, South America. What is the problem? If the voice is good and the acting is good, hire them.
Yep.
Hi plain and simple. Conductors, composers. We did, the only time the Met sold out in the last sort of 10 years was black opera. So, I mean, come on, our product sells. So I, j- I just, I just, I want the eyes to be more open. I would like to see more people who look like me making decisions. Seattle is one place that started making that change, but it's still people who don't look like me who are doing the hiring everywhere. And that means that some really good singers, Gwyneth Ann Jeffers is another great singer. She's a British singer who should be working worldwide. Hmm, not so much. Um, and so yeah, I just I wish that there was a more of an open palette, and it's sometimes really hard to express to people what it's like for 30 years in a career to be the only black woman in a room. And that room had 3,000 people,
Yep.
including the orchestra and my coworkers. And that shouldn't be the way it is.
I'm going to bring up one more Black history name, and then I'm going to ask you a purely musical question. It's about Porgy and Bess, but not any of the usual questions I think people get
Mm,
about Porgy and Bess. It's strictly musical. The name I wanted to bring up, do you know the name Charlotte Holliman, Holliman?
yes.
You do. Talk about because I do too, but we may be the only two, and her daughter.
Sorry, say that. Oh, and her daughter, you said.
Yes, because Charlotte Holliman, the singer, has a daughter named Charlotte Holliman Jr., let's call her, who I know
Oh,
somewhat.
I don't know anything about her daughter.
Maybe
Talk to
you
me.
know the
Talk.
daughter. Okay, so I'm talking about Senior, the singer who you were talking about another one who became the first camera singer in Germany. Charlotte
Yeah.
Holliman took the Italian route and was a major star in Italy before Leontine Price, before a lot of the others. But at a certain point, gave up singing, though she liked it, and became the music professor and singing teacher at Howard University. And for decades, many of the great singers who came out of Howard, including Jesse Norman, maybe Denise Graves, I'm not sure, um, all were in one way touched or another by Charlotte Holloman. And when she died, it struck me that I saw no coverage anywhere about Charlotte Holloman. So I wrote and published for WQXR Radio here in New York a big tribute and memory of Charlotte Holloman, including an interview with her daughter, Charlotte Jr. But I want her name out there simply because she's a major figure who somehow has been lost in the in the in
in the
the
canon.
in the canon, right? And you were talking about Aida, Angel Blue sing Aida in Berlin. Jessie Norman made her European debut in Berlin as Aida at the age of 24. People forget that because she's so identified with French and German music, but she began as a 24-year-old Aida in Berlin. So here's my question that I've always wanted to ask many, many singers. It's the role that you've sung, Serena, in Porgy and Bess. And when I teach Porgy and Bess, which I do a lot, I usually describe Serena as the religious leader of Catfish Row and Mariah as the secular, the political leader of Catfish Row. And then there are all these other characters, but those two are very important. And Serena has the most glorious music in the opera. She's sort of the queen of the night in a way that we always remember the music of Serena. We always remember the music of the Queen of the Night and Magic Flute. But she's often cast as a mezzo, and yet I, I, if I were looking at the score and casting, I would cast a soprano. Why is she usually cast as a mezzo?
Well, she's usually cast as a dramatic mezzo and one much younger than I am at the moment. Gave her up a while ago. My first professional job outside of San Francisco Opera was in Porgy and Bess and at La Scala with
Saw it.
Houston Grand
There.
Opera. And
Saw it.
uh, there's a lot of folks who say Porgy and Bess should be just either stopped or allowed to be performed by anybody who can sing the role well. Serena I think the reason she's cast as a mezzo is because she's got a bit more fire in the belly, and you don't necessarily, yes, we like to hit all our notes, but you need somebody who's ready to throw it all out there. Um, I mean, Gina Vaughn was a great Serena. Also a
Another
Kammersängerin
American
here
who
for
lives in Germany.
yeah, exactly, a Black German Kammersängerin who was also and is the first, Black, teacher at Indiana, period.
And she was on this show about 3 years ago.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
is, somebody who we're about the same age, but she came here long before I did. She's a real somebody whose work before me made things easier for me to come here. But Serena, Porgy and Bess. Porgy and Bess, black folks, black opera singers who do things other than Porgy and Bess, there's lots of discussions about it. The question is that the way in or is it the way out? I.e., if you get in, that's the only thing you'll ever sing. Or if you get in and then you get out, is that the only thing that people will ever associate you with? Um, Serena is a part that I loved singing. The last time I think I sang Serena, where was it? Oh, Paris. Um, but a- it's a long night at the office. Let's
It
put it
is.
that
Yeah.
way. It's a long night at the office, but I would rather be singing Serena than Bess. That's also a long night at the office.
Yep.
People don't quite realize that it's basically Butterfly with a bit of groove. Um, but my Serena days are long past. I'm definitely a Mariah now. So, but the first one I
Mariah
did
vocally
was
or temperamentally or how you
both,
move? Okay.
both.
For example, I mean, I've heard my first Porgy and Bess when I was about 6. My father took me. My father adored George Gershwin, and not only he adored all good music, but he was born when Gershwin was hot. So
Ah,
the soundtrack when my father was 7 or 8 years old was George Gershwin, who was still alive. Gershwin died when my dad was about 16, and my dad became a professional musician at 13. So already that was in the air. So that's
mm,
why he took me to Porgy and Bess when I was really a little kid, at Brooklyn Academy of Music. And but Serena, as I said, like the Queen of the Night, has music that once heard you don't forget. She gets the biggest applause, often more than Porgy or Bess. Um, and but as you said, she's there, or maybe I said at the end of the opera when Porgy says, "I'm going to New York."
mm,
Serena is saying, "No, don't go." She's still there. She, and in a way, Mariah, but especially Serena, are the moral backbone. And when you're the moral backbone of a long, complicated, magnificent opera, you it is a long night at the office because
mm,
other people come and go. Sport and Life get
mm.
chased out by Serena. Um, and but she's there. She's the rock along with Mariah in a different way. But it's really Serena. She's like the
Yeah,
Brun. I never thought of this before.
yeah,
She's like the Brungana of. I'm referring to Tristan and
and
Isolde.
but
The
that's
Porgy and
one
Bess
of
go
the
off, and she's
well,
there.
when he says, "I'm on my way," every night, all the times that I sang Porgy and Bess, I cried through the last trio.
Me too.
Just when he says, "I'm on my way," you just and we always talked among ourselves, should we do number 2? Do we find them in New York?
Yeah.
You know, does he find her? Does he does
Does
he
he
go
get to New
north?
York?
That, uh, that as an opera person, hmm, that's a good number 2. But the
Yep.
question is, who's gonna write the music? So, you know, um, but there's always, a question about how our community is portrayed in that opera.
Yep.
And it's one of the things that I really applaud the Met for in creating new Black work and new work
Yes.
about world majority ethnic stories. And we don't see a lot of that here, but in the what we call the free scene, there's a lot of that here outside. But in
In
major
Germany. Yeah.
houses, you don't get queer stories, black stories, feminist stories, you don't get a lot of stories that stray from the usual. And even if we can complain about, okay, it's written by 2 white Jewish guys, the story itself still has resonance.
Yeah.
It's a story about love, about passion, about joy, sorrow, pain, and it's got some stonking good music that's really hard to
And Best
play.
You Was My Woman now is one of my 3 or 4 favorite love duets in all of opera.
Old yeah. Well, I gotta tell you, and I know you're gonna laugh at me, but one of the best gigs of that opera I ever did was in Japan. They can swing.
Yeah.
They played that opera like jazz, puts it all of the energy. I'm sorry, in Italy it was a little less swingy,
Yeah.
but with the Japanese just they were so welcoming. It was so exciting. It was like something they now I'm talking about the 90s. So it was
Yep.
something they had really never seen before. But as a first gig as a professional opera singer, to do that in the steps of my great great aunt, who was one of the first Annies who traveled with Porgy and Bess in the 20s and the
Uh-huh.
30s in South America as well. It was sort of like, "Ha! Okay, th this is what we're bringing." And, yeah, I so I it's also I've actually never sung a Porgy and Bess with a black conductor. Hmm.
Yeah. That's worth doing. One more
Yeah.
thing on this topic, and then we're going deep into the music. Um, I was referring before to my very dear friend, black singer from Houston. He's a tenor. He's a wonderful tenor, and he refused to do Porgy and Bess, to do Sporting Life, though he would have been perfect, because
Mhm.
he said then nobody will think of
Would
me for that. Because he said, and he was correct. He said, I sing Meyerbeer in Germany. Why should I be singing Sporting Life in Bilbao or Houston or wherever? Because he's from Houston, so they looked at him when they were doing that famous production in the 70s. And he was in Treemonisha with Kathleen Battle, for example, early on. But he basically, that's as far as he went with that, because he said, I sing Meyerbeer and Donizetti better than most people. Hire me for that or don't hire me. And he was right. And it cost him in certain ways, but he stuck to his guns musically. And I thought that was terrific that he did. Now, I always love when I speak to a wonderful artist like you to talk about some of their early teachers. And you had two teachers who I think the world of, and I've not had a chance to talk to anybody about them, Jan De Gaetani and Blanche Thiebaum.
Mm.
How did you meet
Two
them
women.
and what did you learn?
Woof. Janda Gaetani. I didn't know. I'm gonna get teary. I didn't know what I knew until my mother-in-law passed, and I had a performance of Aida. And she had said to me in a voice lesson at Eastman when I was struggling with some stupid breakup with a boyfriend, and I couldn't sing because, of course, I was way too upset as a 17-year-old. And she said, "Look, my husband left me. I had no money. I had a gig. My job was to sing the Verdi Requiem until the soprano started at the end of the piece. That was my job. That's your job. They bought your ticket." Blah, blah. And I remember thinking, eh? What does that got to do with, you know, being an opera singer working? My mother in law passed. I was away doing a gig. My husband was sitting by her bed. I had to work. Pace di Ploro. Joe Green got me through.
Yeah.
And that was that was her voice. And I was too young to understand what she meant at the time about the job. And because you always think as a singer that the job is the emotion. No, the job is the job. We have to get up, we have to do the work. And Blanche Tabum, San Francisco dramatic mezzo, taught me my entire rep and gave me all her scores. Period. Taught me my entire rep. And at 80, stood in a practice room when I could not remember Fricka in Rheingold and sang the piece from her 1952 Rheingold at the Met. Full movement, full vocal. Uh, okay, right. And so she she was the person who, as a professional singer going from chorus to professional roles, taught me everything. She got me ready for my first part in Germany as Clytemnestra, way too young, but
Mm,
taught me the ring.
yeah.
Taught me the ring. And she was also an immigrant. Swedish American singer who had heyday at the Met when, post-war or in between the war years when a lot of European singers couldn't come. But she, man, force of nature, gave me all of the tools, all the vocal tools. When I moved to Germany in 97, I came in September and I got meningitis in December. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything. And when I went to her the first day, she said, "You need to have a book where every day that you come to a lesson, You write down first what your questions were, second what we did, and third, after your lesson, what you felt physically that helped, and bring that every lesson. When I had to recover, that book got me back
Oh,
working. And the
wow.
next role I sang was Fricka in Augsburg. These two women were extraordinary singers in their own right. I mean, Jan was like an American treasure,
Yeah.
absolute American treasure. I
She's
sing a
not as
lot
well
of
known as she should be, which is part of why I'm asking you to talk
yeah.
about.
Well, the thing that I find really interesting about Jan is that Crumb wrote works for Jan. Her sound is she wasn't an opera singer. She was a concert singer, but an extraordinary artist and surrounded herself. I mean, Eastman in the 80s was a great place to be. So
Yeah.
she surrounded herself with good people, and it was also Aspen at the time. But but that switch to somebody like Blanche was a European switch, but still based in America. So I had both sides. Blanche was also attached to the Met because she was the head of the West Coast Met auditions and bloody, bloody, bloody. But both women were incredibly strong, powerful artists. I mean, Blanche was known at the Met as Blanche the Bomb, which was, and she held on to that so happily, hair down to her knees. Um, but before them came my aunties, the people in my family who were classical musicians. Undine Smith Moore is also or was also a relative. My uncle is my long-term mentor. Um, so I've been really, really, really lucky with people who have kept me on the straight and narrow, dropped in a couple of pebbles of insight that I've been able to hold on that appear when I least expect it. And I just hope for younger singers that I can be that person that when they're stuck someplace and don't know what to do, that they can remember something I said or something I taught them because those are the people that keep you going.
Blanche, speaking of keeping it going, Blanche Seabaum sang with Toscanini.
Yeah.
Did she ever talk about that, about singing for Toscanini?
Um, Blanche had a lot of really good stories. She found him extraordinary. I mean, because she did the evening fireside
Right.
things on NBC.
Yeah.
And she sang with Leontine Price for her first professional performance in San Francisco. I mean, the stories Blanche had were, at the time, I didn't realize how if I had had my BBC head on, I would have had my recorder out because the stuff she lived, I mean, she's th- a- a- extraordinary, extraordinary. But singing with Toscanini, she said was great. Her funniest experience was her debut as Baba the Turk at the Met, and she was
In
well known.
Stravinsky's Great Progress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and her 2 funny bits about that was she designed her own costume because she had hair down to her knees, which is why she was known as somebody who was a little uncomfortable, but she also said that Stravinsky didn't know what he had written. So he would be conducting, and some of the singers would say, "Oh, no, that's a B flat," and he would go, "Ah, whatever." So she didn't exactly find him the most influential conductor of her career, I could say. But sadly, after the war, when folks came back from Europe, you know, uh, American singers were no longer, you know, uh, top of the list for
They're not
engagement. So
valued. Suddenly the Europeans,
yeah,
well, I mean, when the Europeans were Leonie Rieseneck and Birgit
yeah,
Nilsson, Franco Corelli, we value them, of course. But I know exactly what you're saying, that many Americans were shunted aside. But interestingly, some of them, like Regina Resnick,
Like,
picked up and went to Europe and made a
and did
major career in Europe because she had all that artistry and training and had been a soprano and became a mezzo and was smart as a whip, and therefore worked with the kind of European directors
that,
who she
yeah,
didn't always have at the Met. And she was just right for those European directors and could hold her toes to Herbert von Karajan without being intimidated. And she
yeah,
was she was the right person to send to Europe from the United States.
yeah,
That New
exactly.
York strength and gritty, grittiness that we love, but at the same time was very humane
N-
and very open to artistic creation.
And a damn fine singer.
Yeah. And now that we're talking about her, and I'm thinking of another singer too, I want to address a topic that you just raised that I think is very crucial now. Um, I'm an author. I care very deeply about books. I care very deeply about my own collection of books because one day when I'm not here, I want them to be in the right place where people can use them. Because I've gathered, especially on things like Giuseppe Verdi, a collection of books that few people have. Also on Michelangelo, a few Italian figures. But I know of a very wonderful, quite old now, wonderful American star who you certainly know, who decided rather than leave her scores to one institution, that she's a mezzo, that if singer X should have her Delilah score, and singer Y should have, let's say, a Cherubino score, and singer Z should have Fricka, that those who are, she gave them personally to the singer she felt would be the next person to carry on the legacy of that role. Um, and a lot of singer scores now are not necessarily winding up in places where they will be used. They're winding up in boxes, and sadly, the
Minor,
recent fires in California, a lot of wonderful books went up in flames in California, in Los Angeles,
mm,
including a whole collection of things of Arnold Schoenberg, but not only.
I saw that. Yeah,
And
yeah,
the artist
yeah.
Gary Indiana, all of his books, when all these things that we think, well, we'll put them aside and then they'll deal with them one day, are lost. And I think that a singer's or a conductor's score or an instrumentalist score with markings and ideas and history needs to be placed in the right place so that it will be passed down. What are your thoughts on this? And what are you doing with your scores?
Okay, you have hit. I know we've been on the phone for an hour and a half, but I'm telling you,
It feels like 10 minutes, my dear.
you have hit a major sore point. When I moved from Scotland to Germany, and there were a lot of roles that I wasn't going to sing again, and scores that I got from Blanche with her notes from the
Uh,
Met, hardbound.
yeah,
Nobody wanted them. Nobody wants paper. Kids
on digital.
went to three major universities. Hmm, they didn't want gowns. I mean, I'm not 20 anymore. So I've got all these handmade, beautiful, beaded gowns where I said to the Royal Conservatoire, to London, to Manchester, would you be interested in me just coming for a day? If they fit the kids, great. If they don't, that's fine too. But I've got these scars from a 30-year career. Nope. I know six major singers major singers who have just gotten rid of all their scores.
Wow.
Even with my notes, even with conductor's notes, even with um, um, notes from different directors, nobody's interested. I mean, when Blanche gave me her scores, it was like, ah, so that's how you sing that phrase.
Right.
Ah, oh, nope, all digital. All digital. No interest in carrying paper. While I understand the weight, there is very little, and I don't want to bang on like some old diva, angry opera singer, but they're 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 their history of the score.
Yeah.
There's history of the score. Who was that conductor? What was the tempo? Breathe here. Don't breathe there. If you know that singer's style, oh, that's where I'm having a problem. That's what they did.
How
It's
did
like
she do the passaggio?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where do you breathe if the conductor is too damn slow and you're tired? How do you fix that? Um, also, a lot of singers keep the dates of when they performed in the score.
Yeah.
Kids don't care if it's not online. Eh, and that I think is really, really sad. It's sad, but scores mine are. I'm still an old school girl. I print my PDFs out.
Yeah.
And, my Hindemith is on paper because 'cause I'm too old to, read on a tablet, but, yeah, the times have totally changed.
Yeah.
Times have totally changed, and I think it's sad because I think singers lose, w um, the personality of the because everybody assumes the Callis was perfect. No, she practiced.
Oh, yeah.
Blanche practice. You, you know, all of the people that we think are perfect, they practiced and they made notes. And where did those notes go? Into a score.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you get somebody who you get their diary or their book of, what they've done, where they've been. But largely, the private sphere of an opera singer is in the score, and they're just not wanted anymore. Um, I mean, I must say though, if you go to the Strand, you can still find scores.
Bookstore in New York City on
Yeah,
12th. Yeah.
yeah. If you
Just
go
down the
there
block from
and
where
you
I teach
go to
at
the
FIU. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can still find scores. I mean, I go for cookbooks and scores, but you can still find scores where you're like, who? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's like historically exciting. It's historically exciting to find out who was the conductor, what the tempi were, you know. Yeah, I think YouTube is okay, fine, but it's not that connection that you need with the conductor and the other artists where you're like, oh, he likes to do this or that, and those things are disappearing, sadly.
It's kind of like an
Sadly.
artist, let's say Michelangelo, but could be many artists who worked out his ideas in designs, in drawings, and then, got the gesture just right for the hand of the Annunciation, or Michelangelo, the hand of God reaching out to
Mm,
at the moment of the creation to Jesus. And but how did Michelangelo get those hands just right? He drew them repeatedly on drawings,
yeah,
and that's the same as the singer's markings in the score. I love that at the New York Philharmonic, where they've commissioned a lot of music, that they have the scores and the markings of the first conductors. So you have Mahler and his markings of his own scores, and then you have Bruno Walter and Leonard Bernstein's markings on those scores, and you learn how Mahler influenced Walter and then Bernstein and so forth to today. And that's such precious, irreplaceable knowledge of the type
yeah.
that cannot be taught in any master class. If you
No,
read the
and
music,
I don't when I was in New York doing, my research for West Side Story, I managed to be lucky enough through my BBC contacts to get into the musical theater, uh, museum, and I got to see the book, the original book. Um, they were actually shooting the movie while I was there, which was really interesting, which as an opera singer, particularly because the whole story centers around them tearing down the place where they put them at,
yeah,
So it was a really um interesting sort of connection of stories. And so I'm with the curator of the musical theater museum library, and he says, "Well, would you like to see the original set?" I was like, "Oh, yes," in the model, obviously. So he takes me to see the original set, And we're strolling through, look at the set. Ooh, that's great. I'm looking at the book and then I look up. I was like, wait a minute, that's Aida from 1996 at Scala. He was like, yeah, this is the model. I was like, no, 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 no. That was my first professional gig ever. And so you walk into a place like that and you think for those of us it's like history, but kids, people, that stuff needs to be saved, valued, unearthed, and I mean
Identified.
yeah, exactly. And I just thought, okay, I'm here for West Side Story and I'm looking at the book from 19 blah 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 blah, and that was my first gig.
Yeah.
This is a place that needs to be kept. And one of the docents was the cover for Marita, uh, um, who had for the original cast, who said, "Oh, I'm happy to talk to you." I was like, Only in New York." I mean,
Yeah.
again, only in New York, but when you have people who have a score from 150 years ago who say, paper,"
Yeah. You
it's
see, that's
sad.
part of what this program is about and why I created it almost 5 years ago, because I really feel that we were having a cultural blackout of people of our generation not documenting what we know. This conversation is not about showing off. It's about imparting knowledge so that someone in the future will watch this and say, so that's the way Andrea Baker thought. So that's what Fred Plotkin experienced. That's what Black History Month meant in 2025. All of these reasons for that. Um, so we could talk about that one endlessly, but I want to read a poem by Langston Hughes, if I may,
Hmm.
called Dreams.
Ah, yay.
Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow.
For
Tell
my
me about
show.
that poem.
Yeah. Tales of Transatlantic Freedom is part of my Sing Sister Sing series, and I wanted to do a poem in the piece. It's text, it's poetry, it's about sort of African diaspora narratives. But my two aunties were one of the first Black people in the Harlem Renaissance to start opera classes for young Black kids. And they worked with Langston Hughes, just generally speaking, as artists during the Harlem Renaissance. And I felt it was really important to tap into the unusual, particularly if I do the show in German or in French, um, or in Europe, generally speaking, to bring Langston to a new audience. And holding fast to dreams is something that as opera singers we've been doing Ciceretta Joyner Jones. I mean, who's the young Patty? Also, just packed up their bags and followed their dreams. And it's simple. It's it connects in multiple languages, and it's a really good link between the music that I use in the piece, which is a lot of, as I said at the front, um, African diaspora composers, some classical, some modern, some, pop. And I feel that it pretty much in two paragraphs says it all. Um, and it's something that people can relate to. And there have been a couple of performances where actually, which is pretty surprising, young people sort of give you that look like, oh my gosh, I know that poem, which to me is kind of like, all right, some teacher somewhere
Yeah.
taught, taught, taught rep, taught that there were poets before 1960 who speak um, language that a universal language. And as you said, as an honorary black man, um, we need to hear from black poets. I love me some Maya. I love me some Tony. But we need to hear from other black poets that are relevant to just everyday life to everybody. And um, um, yeah, it's yeah, that's one that is a really powerful moment in the piece, um, because it comes from, or it comes before my dream, which is a piece written by the first African American woman to write an opera. So it's really an exciting moment for me in the piece.
Do you know the wonderful writer Jill Nelson, black writer?
Not personally.
Okay, but you know who she is.
Yes.
Shaken Not Stirred, many
Yeah.
wonderful books, and she's a great, great person. And I'm saying she's a great person, even though I'm about to mention a compliment she paid to me that you just did. In 1980, no, it was Christmas 79. She said to me, your gift, Fred, for the holiday for me is I'm making you an honorary black person.
Yay! You are welcome.
No,
We
but
can
you're the
both walk
second
down the
person to say
street.
that.
We can both walk down the street and be DWB
It
together.
it took 46 years for the second person to say it, but when you said that, I remembered wonderful Joe Nelson. Um,
Ah,
so today is February 7th. You are in Massachusetts, and starting
mhm.
tomorrow in Dennis, Massachusetts. What will you be doing in the next week in Massachusetts and then Canada?
Um, I am bringing Tales of Transatlantic Freedom with Howard Moody, who's a well-known operatic composer, but he's a multi-instrumentalist, and my uncle, Newman Taylor Baker, who is a world famous percussionist. We are working with young people at the Rose Conservatory, which is a new conservatory serving underprivileged kids, but serving them with mentorship and classical music. And doing a community workshop in Dennis on the same day. And then the 8th, we have a concert. It's at 3 in the afternoon so that older folks who don't like to drive at night can make sure that they get there. Then we're doing a concert on the Sunday morning with Howard Moody featured as organist at the Dennis Union Church. And then Monday through Wednesday, we are doing a residency at the Rose Conservatory. So we'll do a musical workshop and third, a short concert for the kids so that they get to see people who look like them making classical music, new creations. Howard and I have done some new arrangements of traditional music, pop music, blues music, gospel music, opera, and we feature Black composers from around the globe. And so, yes, it's February. I know it's our 1 month, but still also featuring queer composers and some queer female composers that I really treasure, uh, who I want to bring their music out and have their music heard. And so that's what we're doing. You can check it out on the website, Sing Sista Sing. That's AH, not ER,
It's
.com.
like New Yorkers say butter, Buttaah. You say sister.
So
That's
it's
what you can't
exactly,
say.
exactly, exactly. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a really beautiful trip home. And as I said, the woman who had me sing my first opera, Maggie Bossy, who heads the music department at Dennis Union Church, has invited us for the residency, and our concert is in benefit of the Rose Conservatory. So if you can make your way to the Cape and it's not a meter deep in snow, we would love to see you there.
I've never been to the Cape, Martha's Vineyard, or Nantucket. And
Wow.
I know I've been all over the world, but I've never been there.
Wow. Well,
Which,
Dennis is beautiful.
you know,
And my mom's side of the family spent much of their childhood, and I still have family on Mother's Vineyard. So yeah,
yes, in
it's a
fact,
nice.
um, you were talking about cookbooks before. I'm a very close, longtime friend of Dr. Jessica B. Harris.
Oh no, you
And
are
I am
not.
you did not see my program with Jessica a couple of years ago. We go back a long way, like really a long way as in New Yorkers and so on. And I adore her. And she also, Jill Nelson has community in Martha's Vineyard, but Jessica basically sets up residence in Martha's Vineyard. And during the pandemic, she very carefully went there to avoid, she did not get sick, very carefully went there to protect herself. But through her, I came to know more about Maya Angelou. So when I
Hmm.
talk to people, I learn about people they knew, like you and Blanche Seabaum now is something which I delighted in hearing. Um, and all deserves to be documented and shared. And I want to ask now, February 15th, Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. What are you doing there?
I'm taking Howard Moody with me. We're doing Tales of Transatlantic Freedom. It's part of their Black History Month. Black History Month in Canada is the same as in the US, different than in the UK. Um, but we're going, I think, probably because of Tremonisha, which I did in Toronto a few years
Scott
ago.
Joplin's opera.
Yeah, but it was newly done, all black female direction, conductor, um, and they called and said, "Would you like to come and sing?" So I said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." So I'm going to be part of their opening of their Black History Month weekend. So we leave Massachusetts on the Thursday and gig on the Friday. So um, and have not ever brought one of my own pieces to Canada. So I'm kind of excited about that. It'll be fun.
By the
It'll
way,
be
when
fun.
people say to me, why is Black History Month in February? My answer is because Leontine Price was born on February 10th. So her birthday is coming up, and that to me is a national holiday.
And that's a much well, I'm sorry, Dr. King, but
Oh, well, Dr. King as well, but he was born in January
yeah, I know, but they squeezed it in, but Dr. King's wife was an opera singer. So, hey,
in Boston, actually.
not just in Boston.
No, I
One
know,
of
but
the
he
first
went to Boston to woo her.
yes.
I wrote an article about this like 20 years ago about how Coretta King's being an opera singer is part of what brought Martin Luther King, I should say
Boston
Coretta Scott to being an opera.
Conservatory.
Yeah. And therefore, the Boston area is very influential in its having brought together Martin and Coretta.
Yeah, I sang in the First African Baptist Church in Tuscaloosa, Tennessee. And
Tennessee or
I
Alabama?
sang yeah, Alabama. Sorry, I
Yeah.
said Tennessee. Alabama. And stood on the stage, sang, and then somebody said, "Do you know the last time I was here to hear a concert was when Coretta King sang on the" I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, uh, I'm so glad somebody didn't tell me that before, because it's the
War.
home of Dinah Washington as well." So I did this, but yeah, yeah, First African Baptist Church, Bloody Tuesday, do some research. But that was one of the churches that Dr. King sent his young, up and coming students to do research. And Bloody Tuesday was a year before Selma. And that's
Right.
how they learned how to do a peaceful demonstration, could one say. And Ms. King came and sang.
So it's interesting. You just triggered something in my head that I had not planned to speak about, but it combines two topics that we addressed today. Um, I was a very close friend of the actress and singer Nell Carter, who was Alabama. We had our differences, certainly politically. She was considerably to my right, but she was a very incredibly smart, perceptive person, much broader in her cultural reference than anybody would give her credit for, because she was seen just as being the sort of spiky, funny, beautiful singing, but slightly brash person. But she was much more subtle than all that. And I used to take Nell to the opera a lot. And
Oh.
Nell, I took her to hear Martina Arroyo and Grace Bumbry in Aida. And I worked with Martina and Grace a lot, and am a close friend of Martina. And after that, Nell said, I want to sing Amneris. And I said, you can't. I love you, but you cannot. And I said, you are great at
Try
what
the
you do.
second act, honey, naked in a bathtub.
That's right. I mean, I mean, Nell, great, great singer, and not just in Fats Waller, for which she was famous. She sang some of the best Irving Berlin you would ever hear. Her Irving Berlin was impeccable. But um, she said to me, okay, what can I sing? And I said, you can sing Despina in Così fan tutte. And I took her to Così fan tutte, and she grasped all of the sexual and gender subtext in the opera. She really got that complicated opera. She respected the music, but she said to me, I'm not playing a maid. I said, well, she's not a maid.
Mhm.
She is the person who is the outsider who comments and is the engine of the story, because she brings comedy and pathos and has great music on her own, which Nell could have sung that music, I think, with study, but she could have sung it. But so I mentioned Nell just for that, but also because we were talking about something before about, do you cancel, do you not cancel? And Nell and Liza Minnelli were friends. And Nell always said, if you're not at your best, you cancel. And Liza always
Ooh.
said, if you are not at your best, you go on, because these people have bought tickets and they want to see and hear Liza Minnelli. And Nell said, well, if Nell Carter goes on and she's not at her best, they'll remember that she was not at her best. Do you stand on one side or the other of that, or is there truth in both?
Um, my cancellations, I think I can count on one hand in the last 30 years. Heartbreaking. If you can crawl red red nails to get up to that top pitch, I'll go out. We have something in Germany called an Ansage, which
Yep.
is where if somebody is under the weather, you can have the head of the house come out and say, Andrea Baker is not feeling well today, but she wanted to make sure that she could give you a performance. And boop. I think a lot of things that people don't understand about the job that we do, besides the fact that you have to practice and be ready, 90% is stay healthy. That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. Eat, drink well, have your tea. All of that is my job. It's my job. My job is to be ready to sing. Now, 30 years ago, it wasn't Monday, Wednesday, Friday in 5 different countries on 3 different continents. But still, when I fly on a plane, I have to make sure that I'm ready. When I get off the plane, I have to make sure I'm ready. I wash my hands like a mad woman. You, j- you, ju- that's that's my job. A marathon runner is to run their 10 miles a day. My job is to stay healthy. And that's part of the thing that is, if I had a Lohengrin tomorrow, we would not be having a 2-hour conversation.
Oh,
I would be quiet, but I don't sing Orchard anymore. Eee. So, but I think the thing a lot of people don't understand is that they assume that because I'm home, eating well, steaming, doing all that stuff, and then getting on a train and arriving at a theater, that somehow is luxurious. It's not. It's just me steering clear, staying quiet. I remember Jessie Norman. As a young singer, Jessie Norman, I read an interview with her and she said, "Ooh, before a performance, I never speak." And I remember thinking, how arrogant. Why would you listen? Guess what?
Yeah,
Before a performance, you don't go to the bar, you don't go to the pub, you don't go watching football, you just sit quietly taking care of your instrument because, like the person you were quoting, if you sing like a pig, es especially now, it will be remembered, and
yeah,
with an iPhone or a telephone or something like that, and the minute it pops up on the internet, your agent receives that phone call that says, "Mm, she's old, she's fat, is she still healthy?" You know, and that it's stressful, it's uncomfortable, but it's always been that way. I mean, I sort of look back at my calendar 20 years ago and I think, "Holy shit, how did I manage to do that?" Young, fit, just eat well and go, go, go on the treadmill. But now that I'm older, I have to make changes. I have to watch out for my body differently. Vocally is not such a stress because I'm not singing Orchard, but knees, hips, I mean, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I can do my work, but I think what a lot of people don't understand is the mental and physical stress it is to stay fit.
yeah.
Not I mean, most people as a
Constantly
bank
vigilant.
manager,
Yeah,
constant if I have a cold and I'm a bank manager, I can go to the office.
right,
If I'm a singer, I can't. So, yeah, you have to schedule differently. I don't sing as much. I'm not singing 70 performances a year of Carmen anymore. So, that's a very different thing, but you still have to be fit. And with COVID and on a train and the travel and all that, I mean, that for me is the most stressful. I know how to keep myself fit physically, but it's one of the things I like about your show because people don't sugarcoat. And I think
right.
a lot of young, so I think a lot of, I, I love my job. I love my career. I have had a brilliant career, but people need to understand that everybody's different
Yeah,
and you need to find a way to navigate and stick up for yourself. And when you're not vocally fit, if it's just a rehearsal, it's just a rehearsal. Nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to die. Stay home, steam, relax, sleep, and be ready for the gig. The gig is what's important. And I know when you're young and just starting out, you're pressured and you're pushed. And I had a colleague, Ron Pale, fabulous American singer, and we were doing Meister Singer, and it was a huge, huge, huge set of performances in Nürnberg. He called in sick on a Friday, stage orchestra rehearsal. Everybody was like, eh? Eh? And I said, no, I called in sick on Friday because Saturday was off. Then I got Sunday. Monday evening was the next time I had to turn up. Did anybody die? No, nobody died. Did he sing well? Did he sing the premiere? Yup, he did. There were some Leitung that were upset, but the rehearsal went on. They played and somebody sang in from the side. So if you know how to take care of yourself, that's like really, really, really important and something you need to learn early on because if you learn it in the middle, it can be too late.
When I was at the very start of my career, I was 16 when I had my first professional job in opera. And by 18, I had met and worked with Morella Freni, Birgit Nielsen, and Tito Gobi. And Tito Gobi
Oh,
became my teacher. And Morella Freni said to me, she called me Ted. I don't know why, but she always called me Ted. She said, Ted, I can give you a lot of advice, but just one piece of advice: never kiss an opera singer. Dad had a kiss
That's
and
good.
opera singer. And
That's
Birgit
good.
Nilsson said to me, well, I'm going to give you some advice. You know, we can do all these things that no one else can do. But you know what, darling? If the birdies are not happy, they don't sing. So keep
Yeah,
me happy.
yeah, yeah.
And Peter Kobe basically said, you know, it's about understanding. It's about the human understanding of what you artists do. And my part of my job was to make sure that you could do what you do in a serene way and where you felt comfortable going to the stage or coming from the stage. And if it was not ideal, that I wouldn't sugarcoat it, but on the other hand,
Mm,
I would make you understand you're okay and you'll do better tomorrow,
you but
or
yeah,
if it's a problem, we can try to address it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but I remember for a second, never kiss an opera singer.
Never kiss an opera singer. Yeah, unless she doesn't or they don't have a performance for the next 3 weeks.
No, even at
But,
that, never kiss an opera singer.
mm,
And
it's
when she retired, I did the last public event with Barella Franey in the United States, and it's on video that people can watch at NYU. And at the end of the evening, I said to her in Italian, um, "Can I kiss you now?" She said, "Now, yes."
yeah, but the thing about it that's hard, funerals, weddings, uh,
Yeah,
dinners, Christmas, New Year's, but, you just people and our partners are such fucking troopers.
yeah,
There are our partners, husbands, wives, fucking troopers with what they have to put up with.
yeah,
'Cause it's just it's, we're bonkers, but, the passion is there. I there's a side of me today that remembers Otto Schenk that thinks, "How in goodness name did you live this long in the game?" But I still remember when I walked into the room at the Met, and there he sat on his throne, Valkyra. I just remember thinking, "Oh my god. How lucky is this little black girl from Sudbury, Massachusetts to be in here with this man?" And when I said that to him in German, he kinda gave me that look like, "Ah, Sie sprechen wohl Deutsch." I was like, "Ja, ich wohne in Deutschland." He was like, "Mhm." But it was just our our job is incredible. The history is incredible, even though it's difficult, stressful, sometimes really uncomfortable. But when you have a day like that, as you have had many at the
yeah.
Met, um,
I love Scala.
when when that day happens and you just look up and that energy and frisson happens where everybody in the orchestra's tired, the soprano's tired, tenor's tired, everybody tired. But somebody opens their mouth and magic happens. And everybody just goes, "Ooh, aha." It's one of those nights, you don't forget them. You don't forget them. And, I think I'd go back to Blanche when Blanche said, "I can count on 2 hands the number of times it happened." And I remember thinking, "How is that possible?" And she said, "You come off crying, or you come off laughing, or you cannot remember what happened in the last 4 hours. But those are the only ones, in a 40-year career. And if you're lucky enough to have that many, I can count myself grateful.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, I'm sure
People don't
you've
know
had those
Otto
at the
Schenk
Met.
was a wonderful, wonderful stage director. An example of what I meant at the very beginning of our conversation of someone who looked at the music and the text and tried to understand what the creator of the music and the text were about rather than overlaying his interpretation of it. And he did it beautifully. He directed many things at the Met and Vienna and Munich to some degree. But I got to work on that Ring production with him when it was new, and it exists on video. And just being in the rehearsal room and occasionally getting to ask him a question, um, extraordinary. you were talking about those amazing moments. One of them happened not to be a performance, but the final dress rehearsal of Die Walküre in 1986, in September 86, which was just remarkable. And I remember that everybody's mouths hung open. And I said to Maestro Levana, I said, have you ever done this better? He said, I will next week.
See, the thing for me about that ring, in particular Valkyrie, the reason there were a lot of us there who knew each other was because that year in particular there were new visa restrictions in America.
Ah,
So Ava Wagner was the Met scout, and I had just done the ring with Simon. And the call was, "Do you still have an American passport?" It wasn't, "How fat are you? How old are you? Can you still sing?" It was, "Do you still have an American passport?" "Yes, yes, yes." So myself, Nadine Secunda, Gerhard Siegel, there was like a whole flood of us who had
yeah.
come in from Germany, who had all worked together. Um, and it was so strange, A, for me as an American being at the Met. Ah, oh, here I am. Oh, a pretty ring. It's
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, look, nice light, nice costumes, it tells the story." It's like, I haven't seen one of these ever. Never mind been in one, and so
A magic fire that was actually not fire.
yeah, exactly,
There was no
exactly, but
fire. Yeah.
it just it was so funny 'cause all of us were just sort of like, "Oh, look. That's nice."
Yeah.
Which which we just hadn't seen before because, I mean, everything here is deconstructed and blah, 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 blah. But that was such a beautiful time and a time to see. I mean, you're talking the 80s. I didn't get to see a ring in the 80s. My first was in the early 90s, and San Francisco, it was modern, but it wasn't too bad,
Yep.
with Donald Runnicles.
Barnacles. Yep.
But um, bless you, Donald. Um, but it was just so nice to see something pretty
Yep.
that told the story without any schnick schnack. And yeah, it was also nice to be there with my German American colleagues who were sort of like, "Wow, this is good."
So I know that you and I could talk for another 7 hours, but I want you to save your voice because you have a lot coming up this week in
Yes, I
Massachusetts
do.
and Canada. But you bring up something else. It's kind of like I feel like Scheherazade that you bring up something else and it leads to another story. Um, you, I always wonder among the sisterhood who sing the Valkyries, not to mention the Rhine Maidens and the Norns, but let's talk about the Valkyries. You began with Schwertleiter, you also did Valtrauta, and these are mezzo roles. But beyond there being in a certain voice category, do you all, you sisters who sing the Valkyries, have a sense of each of these women as individual characters? Wagner gives some hint in his text about the two of them, I forget what their names are, who travel alone, Rosweise and Ortlinda, maybe.
Mm.
Um, they travel together. They travel as a team. And I was wondering, why do they travel as a team? And who is Schwertleiter? And I love the name Schwertleiter. I could repeat it a lot because it has such a wonderful, funny but serious sound to it. And do have you been in productions where the producer or the conductor or your fellow artist would say to you, "Well, so and so, this is her story," or are you just a generic eight, apart from maybe from Valtrauta?
Um, I, I I think because having sung Fricka, and I mean, the only part in the ring cycle for a mezzo that I haven't sung is Rossweiser. Um, and I've never been a Rheintöchter because, of course, black girls don't get to be Rheintöchter. Um, there's a the, the Wagner community, as I said, is very small,
Yeah,
and those of us that enjoy it and can sing it all know each other, and so there are there is among, in particularly among the Walküren, a sisterhood.
yeah.
And depending on who you're with, and depending on who's singing, and depending on who, I mean, who's your Brunhild? I mean, that's another question. Is Schwedleiter the deep voice who's the older sister? Or is she a young one who's, is Valtrauta the loud, gregarious one? Or
I think Valtrauta is the smart one.
there's and the brash. I'm
Yeah,
fucking
yeah,
bitchy about the
yeah,
fact
yeah.
that Brunhild is number one and I'm not. That for
Right.
me was always Valtrauta. But
Yeah,
it depends. It depends on who your partners are, your director, if you're ever asked. Um, but vocally, that tends to sort itself out because the higher voices are often the younger singers.
right.
And the middle voices tend to be those in the meat of their career who are like, "Hey, I'm just a Valkyrie. I can go out for a
Yeah,
beer tonight." And the lower voices tend to be those that have probably sung all the others and maybe are at the back.
right.
I have to say one of my favorites was in X with Simon and with the Berlin Phil because it was the first time I had revisited Schwertleiter from my debut. But all of the Valkyries were principal singers in other
Yeah,
stuff.
right.
So it was sort of like, okay, this is fun.
Yeah,
I don't have to be Tosca or Amneris or Ortrud. I can sing well, be ready. And there was one of us who had never been a Valkyrie before, and she happened to be Valtrauta.
uh,
And so she was taken sort of under the wing by everybody else because everybody's like, this is the baby, don't push, don't scream. You have the great instrument. I mean, and we were miles away. It was all the usual stuff, right?
yeah,
But it was so nice to welcome somebody new into the fraternity because that's what that's about. You don't I mean, if you have a staging that actually gives you character, that's great. But usually the text, like Schwertleid, Wurmisch Gestalt schuf sich der Wilde.
yeah,
Also that line is one of the shortest lines in the opera, but people are often sort of like, oh, she was a little upset, you know. Um, and so I think actually for the group of women and also for Fricka. And I mean, Sieglinde is a different side of the coin because she's not uh, in the mix of the girl struggle. Um, I think the sisters, when you get a group of women who are vocally not uncomfortable in themselves, who have done other stuff, who are just like, man, I'm digging my Wagner. Let's make some sound together.
yeah.
And you get a conductor who's okay with that. It is some of the best musical fun I have ever had on stage.
Absolutely. I don't know if
I'm
you know the young, very talented mezzo soprano named Renee Tatum, an American,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
actually lives near where you are. She lives in the Boston area. And I got to work with her early on in her career. And yes, she's been doing this for a while, but she's still quite young. But
Mm.
she began in the Wagner mix right away, doing Rhine Maidens, doing, I don't think Norns, but definitely doing Valkyries, a lot of Valkyries. And I had a conversation with her on the show about a year and a half ago, and she was so conversant in all the details of the ring. And it's as if she lives the ring. Not only she does other music as well, of course, but as you indicated, you either feel it or you don't. And you clearly feel it. Renee Tatum clearly feels it. I clearly feel it, though I'm not a singer. And I just get it. And it's such a satisfying thing when people are whether audience members, opera workers like me, or singers like you, who just completely get it and give themselves to it. And as you said, have a conductor willing to take it with them. And it's kind of like talking to you. It's exciting. It's
It's
fun,
very it's super exciting,
racing.
and I think the longer I'm in the game, the thing that's really exciting is when somebody walks in the room, you have no idea who they are, and they open their face, and you turn, and all of the old school Wagner family goes, "There's a new one. A
Yeah,
new baby is here born." It's never it's I always felt more uncomfortable in the Verdi and, Mozart room, but in the Wagner family, if it's Wagner, Strauss, big dramatic grip.
yeah,
When you hear that, you know, if they can keep their shit together,
yeah,
that that is a new member of the family, and that's just exciting. It's just exciting, and as a I mean, when I did the Met, the last one, the last Otto Schenk, Irene Theorin jumped in.
yeah.
Long story, but she jumped in. I was standing next to her doing her first Brunhild, and to see her at the Met was just like, "Go on, sister, go on, sister." There was no negativity, just hit it, just hit it, blow them out of the water, and that is the Wagner family that I love and and miss a little bit, although Hindemith is close.
Yeah.
Um, but that nobody in our community ever looks around and goes, "Oh, who's that?" No. The community response is, "Hello,
Yeah.
welcome." And that's exciting, especially when you've got, I mean, when I sang in Nürnberg, half of them played in Bayreuth every summer, knew the ring cycle auswendig. They just half of
Sure.
them were looking up while we were working. So I mean, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you were talking about the Wagner Strauss roles, and they're sometimes referred to as the big girls. And one time I was hosting a panel that had Martina Royal, Grace Bumbry, and Mary Grist. And Mary Grist sang a very different kind of repertory from Grace and
Yep.
Martina. And Mary Grist was talking about her repertory, more Mozartian and lyrical and so on. And Martina said, "Well, that's very different from us big girls." And Grace Bumbry said, "Us big girls?" And Martina said, "Grace, you are a big girl.
Big
There's no."
girl. Although, I mean, but that's the thing about Strauss and Wagner repertoire. I mean, I'm sorry, talk to me about second act Lohengrin, Ortrud. She got to sing pretty.
Yeah,
You've been screaming your head off, and now you got to sing pretty, or Tristan and Isolde. You got to. There's just that roof from the top. If some director says, "No, no, 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 no," Brongain is going to sing on stage, are you out of your mind? Have you seen Act 3? So there's there's a really good mix where you have to be able to do both. But if you're comfortable doing the big sing and you can somehow manage to do the quiet, sexy sing,
yeah.
it's just like, wow, uh, it's some of the most exciting work I've ever done. And if you get a conductor who works with you, bam,
Years ago, I got to
bam.
work with a Bulgarian Russian-speaking mezzo who was supposed to do her first Ortrud and didn't speak any German and really didn't have a feel for the character. And we spoke in Italian as our common language.
First
And
language of opera.
yeah, first language of opera. And therefore, um, I was trying to help her along, not musically only, but dramatically. And I remember when I finally had the light bulb moment, and I said to her, "Have you ever sung Marfa in Kovanchina?"
Mhm.
And she said, "Yes." And I said, you take that Marfa and you take all those emotions and you put that into Ortrud, learn your German enough that you can say the words, but your character is Marfa. She's an old believer who has been transplanted into Antwerp, or wherever it's not Antwerp. Is it Antwerp? Where it's set in Lohengrin? Not
No,
Antwerp.
it's not
It's
Antwerp, it's
south of
northern.
Antwerp.
Yeah.
But Elsa von Brabant, yeah,
Yeah, right, yeah.
Brabant. So set in Brabant instead of say St. Petersburg or Moscow. But it's so interesting how these seemingly unrelated characters and emotions, if one can animate you, then you can animate another role.
Yep.
So, Andrea, you and I really could do this for 7 hours. We could take it
I
on the
know.
road.
We need to meet face to face, and I
We
want
need to
some of
meet
your
face to
food.
face. In the meantime, toy, toy, toy for your wonderful activities in Massachusetts
Thanks.
next week. It's in Dennis at Massachusetts, and Sing Sista, Sistah, Sing is it .com, .org,
.com.
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 Anyone in New England, anyone craving a lobster or a scallop,
Indeed. And some cold, fresh, bracing wind in February.
nice,
Yeah,
healthy wind, healthy
yeah,
breeze,
yeah.
get
And
yourself together.
if you happen to be in Europe in May, I'm making my debut in my second Florentina Holzinger piece at the end of May on the 21st at the Volksbühne in Berlin.
In Berlin. Very good.
Yeah,
Andrea,
you'll have to Google her. You won't be able to see much photos because we're all naked, but she
okay.
is an extraordinary director, artist, and feminist creator.
So
So,
serious question. This is not a joke. When you sing naked or with little clothing, do they heat the theater or do they do things differently so that you're all comfortable?
oh, we're always comfortable. I mean, it's German. A German orchestra would never have a cold pit. So no,
Okay.
we're just that's fine. And we're doing so much movement that it's not a problem. Um, and truth be told, it's the funniest thing ever. We talked about Aida. I have done so many second acts naked. Nobody has ever asked me if I've been cold. Nobody has ever asked me if I'm uncomfortable being naked on stage. But all of a sudden, I'm working with a female director and it's all women on stage naked. The first question anybody asks is, are you cold? Is it uncomfortable? How does this make you feel? Blah blah blah. So it's um it's quite an interesting shift in the take on. I think it's largely because it's feminist and queer and from a female perspective that makes people uncomfortable. But I mean, okay, forget that. I've done Yanufa, I've done all these operas where I'm naked on stage, and nobody ever says, hmm, how does that feel? It's always just like, hey, do your job.
Well, I love it in Germany. It's not an issue. It was an issue for me only once in Germany. I went to see Salome in Munich, and you would expect maybe the Salome might be naked, but the executioner was naked
Naked. Yep.
and he was carrying this big axe.
Mm.
And I kept thinking, don't drop the axe.
Don't drop the axe, or my, that axe is awfully big.
I know.
So,
God.
uh,
Please don't,
no, I've done lots of Salomes where all of the Juden are
yeah.
naked. So I mean, it's just, but I mean, I think working with Flo is a nice step off the upper treadmill, which is
Since you
nice.
mentioned the five Jews in Salome, and then we're getting a curtain down.
Yeah,
Um, famous true story from about 1961 or 62. Eric Leinsdorf was conducting a rehearsal of Salome at the Met, and there were the five Hebrews, the five Jews. And at a certain point, he got through that section of the opera, and Leinsdorf put down his baton. He said, "Okay, all the Jews can go. And half the orchestra left.
Orchestra got up and left. Okay, last Met story. This is one that I use in my show from another show. Black singer walks into the Met, gets to the you know how the stage door, they sit up, they're not on
Yeah,
the right. So, black singer comes in, she's got full length mink and blah, and the black security guard says, "Miss Price, so lovely to see you today." And she says, "No, dear, I'm the other one,
Martina.
Martina Arroyo." Yeah, which I'm just so glad she was so calm and collected to
Oh,
just
yeah.
go, "No, dear, I'm the other one." And off she went. Off she went. I still
And
have my
she
Met
sang more
pass.
opening nights at the Met than Leontine did.
Oh, I bet she did.
She did indeed. Yep,
I bet she did. She's totally different, like totally different singer.
yep.
Totally different singer. I mean, I love me some Leontine. I loved her a lot more in concert than I did on an opera stage, but she was a park and bark. I mean, I love me some
Yeah.
Sister Leontine. She was not um theater. What's the best way I can say this in reverence?
Well, we say theater animal, what we mean is someone who's a native to the stage.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
she neat. The
The way
sound was gorgeous.
Grace Bumbry and Shirley Barrett were
Surely
native to
was.
the stage,
Yeah,
both
yeah,
of them.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Leontine was not, but
You
what
could
a
close
sense
your
of
eyes and
humor.
just
What a sense of and what a lovely, wonderful person in my experience. She was just I swoon. She would always say,
well,
"Mr. Plotkin, it's an honor." I would say, "No, the honor is mine." She
it's
said,
all
"I
mine.
know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know."
What she is, because my parents always took me to see her, and
Yeah.
finally somebody we knew got me backstage. And as you can tell, I'm a wallflower and not very vocal. And we got to her dressing room, and she walked out, and I just stood there and cried.
Yep.
And she was like, "Young lady, can y'all talk?" And I was like, "Boo, boo, 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 Miss Price, Miss Price." And my parents were like, "The fuck is wrong with our child?" And she just hugged me,
She
gave
was
me that big
huge.
old bosom hug.
I know.
Of course, my mother, who's a stage mother, said, "Oh, this is our child. She's a budding opera singer." She said, "Ooh," gave me an even bigger hug. But
Yep.
she was so kind, but I couldn't even talk. I
I
still
know.
regret it to this day. I couldn't say anything. Couldn't talk. Couldn't talk. But she was kind.
She was
Is
kind and
kind.
lovely, and I worked with her. I wouldn't say we were friends, but we were lovely colleagues. And Martina's a dear friend. And
Mm,
Martina is just extraordinary too. So, not the
yeah.
other one. They're both.
I've yeah, she did not the other one. I've not met Miss Arroyo, but that's one that I would love to interview.
Oh, I could do that. I could
Oh.
interview. Yeah.
Ah,
I
I would
said to her, and I mean this, that remember answering machines where you had little tapes so you could
mm,
record the message? I
yeah.
deleted all the messages except the one from Martina. If
Ah,
ever I'm a little low, I'll play that message, and it's all I need.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Her birthday
I
was the
can't,
other day. Yep.
I just can't imagine as much as I bitch about today's situation for singers of color and queer singers. I can't imagine what they went through. I can't
Well, I
even
was saying
imagine.
that Miss Price, Black History Month, February, Miss Arroyo, Black History Month, February, her birthday as well. Mm,
Ah, I
yeah,
need to put that in my show. I'm
yep.
going to be
February
emailing you
2nd,
again for some
February
info.
2nd, Martina Arroyo, February 10th, Leontine Price.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. All
So it's
right.
holiday week for me. It's like Festwoche. And
Yeah,
this has been a
Festwoche.
Festwoche.
Festwoche. Well, I'm happy to be in Massachusetts and I'm excited about bringing the show. And I'm so excited to have had the chance to talk to you. Your shows are fabulous.
Thank you.
You
This was
need to
a
know
real
that.
pleasure for me.
They're
And you
just
be well.
fabulous.
Eat a
Yes. And
lobster
you
for
too.
Liz.
And give love to your mom.
I shall. I'll tell her.
She's always a joy on your Facebook feed.
Yes, I'll tell her.
And
Thank you,
and
Andrea Baker.
Okay. Thank you, Fred Plotkin. Have a good night.